Hello and welcome back to part 17 of the Scriptable Objects tutorial for Unity. My name is Krasenstein. Let's get going. We're going to be working on a couple things, making it, just tweaking it, making it a little bit better today. We have to fill out the different effects, what they actually do on the cards. So we're going to start that. So let's go into the cards section of Scriptable Objects. We only have a couple cards. There's only one that actually has, I think there's two that have effects. Right, so the card draw amount one actually works. Okay, so the devastating blow we need. And devastating blow says deal X damage and enemy vulnerable to. Right? And there's nothing in the card data to be able to add this enemy vulnerable. So we have to go add that. So double click on card data. What we're going to add is something called a card effect struct. So we're going to do a public struct card effects. In open brackets, and inside is going to be a public status effect, and public integer of length. Right? Length meaning how many turns. How many turns does this persist for? And effect is which effect gets triggered. All we need to do now is a public card effects array called card effects. We have to make sure that for card effects we have to do a square bracket and do system.serializable on top of it. And that lets us be able to see these card effects in the inspector so we can make them there. We can change them there. The next part where we need to add effects to is going to be inside the enemy data. So we're going to do control comma, enemy data, enter. And we don't have an effect set up yet. We have to do the same thing, system.serializable. And then we do a public struct enemy intent effects. Open brackets. And it's going to be a public status effects, effect, and public integer effect turns. Now let's go back in and we'll fill these in. We're going to go into, so devastating blow will update. And inside card effects, we're going to add one effect to this card, element 0. It is vulnerable length of 2. Now this card will now apply vulnerable for 2 turns to the enemy. Now we need to go into all of the enemies. And we have to add in their stuff as well. They have the passive goblin has a disable, and the angry goblin has a disable. So we have to be able to give those the correct effects. So inside passive goblin, we're going to look over where the disable is, but there's nothing there for the enemy intents. So back in enemy data, we'd ever actually set up an array in the intent for the effects. So public enemy intent effects array called intent effects. Save it. Inside intent effects for the disable, so element 2, we're going to uncollapse that. We're going to hit 1 for the intent effect. Inside, we're going to add frail for 2 turns. So now the passive goblin will inflict frail on you for 2 turns. We need to now also go into the angry goblin and do a similar thing, except for where the attack disable happens. We're going to add one effect here, and he's going to give you vulnerable 2 turns. Now let's go in and test it. So we don't have anything here. So here's the disable. So he's going to be inflicting us with frail. And it didn't work. But are we actually frail? No. And that's because we never actually set up for when the enemies do damage. I don't think we ever set up if they have that actually didn't have effects yet. So in take enemy turn, we need to, inside disable, add status effects to player. So we're going to do a 4 tab int j, because we already have an I, so we can't do j again. J is greater than e dot this turn intent I dot effects intent effects dot length. And what happens is will be a combat manager instance add effect e dot this turn intent I dot effects j dot effect. And it also asks for how long. So e dot this turn intent I dot effects intent effects j dot effect turns plus 1. And the plus 1 is because it needs to start next turn. So if it's 2 turns, it starts for the next turn. The next thing that we need to do is we have to go into Combat Manager. So Control comma Combat Manager. At the very bottom, we're going to add a new public void called reduce all effects on player. Open that up, and inside will be a 4 tab. Int I is less than current status effects dot count. Current status effects lengths I minus minus. Right, so it's saying for each effect you currently have, subtract 1 from its length. Now we're going to run a reverse for loop for 2 R's tab. Int I equals current status effects lengths dot count minus 1. Enter. Do an if current status effects lengths I is less than or equal to 0. Effects manager dot instance dot remove status, and that's going to be the effects manager dot instance dot player status container dot get child I dot game object. Also current status effects lengths dot remove at I and current status effects remove at dot remove at I. And then of course at the very end, effects manager instance update UI status container. So now we have to put reduce all effects on player somewhere in some script, right? And it's going to go back in the enemy manager. At the end of this, at the end of end enemy turn, we have to add this right here. Reduce all effects on player, but it is combat manager instance reduce all effects on player. So now we need to add in what the different status effects do to different cards. So we have to go first to combat manager. So control comma combat manager. And then we're going to hit this little down arrow here and find take damage. What take damage is going to do is after we store the damage, we're doing if current status effects dot contains. This is if the player is taking damage. Status effects dot vulnerable. So if we have vulnerable right now on us, damage equals mathf dot round to int and damage times effects manager dot instance dot get effect, get status effect, and it's calling for vulnerable dot effect strength. Right, so now if you take 5 damage but you have vulnerable, you'll take 5 times the effect strength, which I believe is 1.5. You'll take 7.5, which will round to 8. Now we need effectively the exact same thing, so we're going to copy this. We're going to take it into the enemy script. So enemy, we're going to go to take damage and the little down arrow over here. Right, status effect right there. Same thing, except for this. I believe it is called current status effects for the enemy. Yes, exactly the same code for it. So now when you have vulnerable, the enemy needs to show that in its intent. In the enemy manager script, we're going to go to choose intents for next turn. Enemy E. And inside the enemy attack portion, after we store the damage, we're going to do if combat manager dot instance dot current status effects dot contains status effects dot vulnerable damage equals mathf dot round to int damage times effects manager instance get status effect vulnerable dot effect strength. Subsequently, if we're going to copy the entire thing, and we're going to change this from vulnerable to weak. If weak exists, you're then going to also multiply the damage by weak, which is 25% less damage to be able to show the intent correctly. We also need to show the updated information as well inside cards. Let's go over to the card script. We'll go to process description. We're going to add a couple things to this based on certain effects that exist. So inside combat, we are going to add on top. It's not going to be that simple anymore. This is just for the combat section. If combat manager instance current enemy dot current status effects dot contains vulnerable temp I equals, we're going to put a color in here, color hashtag 007700 end bracket. You can use rich text inside any string to make certain parts bold, certain parts different colors, italicized, underlined. But we're going to do string.format in front of that. Put it in parentheses. It'll be that color 0 inside brackets and slash color. But we're going to get rid of these spaces here. There we go. And we're going to put a comma after. And after the comma, we're going to put what we want to show in that spot. And that spot is going to be mathf.round to int two parentheses strength plus combat manager instance current might. If you have any cards that increase your might, then it'll affect itself there. Outside of the first parenthesis, multiply by effects manager instance get status effect vulnerable dot effect strength, and end it with double parentheses and semicolon. Then, so that's all that does is change the color and increase the damage. If we're going to copy this, put it inside the if statement, and change this to weak, and get rid of enemy. So if we have weak, we're going to then copy all of this again inside open brackets. We're going to change the color to FF0000, and we're going to change this to get status effect weak times effect strength. So after you multiply the vulnerable, then you can multiply the weak, because the enemy could have vulnerable and you could have weak at the same time. So we're going to add an else in here. And so it's if the enemy is vulnerable, or if you're weak, or else temp I equals strength.2 strength. So if there's no effects at all, don't worry about it. In the defense one, you have to make a similar kind of thing, but only for one effect for frail. So if combat manager instance current status effects dot contains effects frail temp I equals string.format, and it's going to be inside quotes, do the caret color equals ff00000 0 inside curly brackets slash color inside carets, comma, and it's going to be mathf.roundInt double parentheses, call it defense, times effects manager instance get effect get status effects dot frail dot effect strength, and then end it with a semicolon. Are we missing a parenthesis? I think so. There we go. Alright, so now we also have to go in and into the enemy script, and to reduce status effects on new turn. It's not being called anywhere. We can hit Shift F12 to see any references. It says no references found. You can also just see here in Visual Studio 2019 that there's no references. We're going to double click it and then hit copy. And then that needs to go in Control Comma, type start new turn, enter. Start new turn. We need combat manager dot instance current enemy dot paste. Let's give it a go. See how it works. Looks like so the enemy got one vulnerable, and he's about to do the attack. He's going to debuff us too. This is his debuff attack, so we should get a debuff up here. So let's defend, and smack. So we did 3 damage because the attack was 2 damage, and it did increase the damage by 1. Increase the damage by 50%. We're gonna hit end turn. We're gonna get hit for 7, and we have vulnerable put on for 2 turns. Now we're gonna take more damage. His vulnerable disappeared, so everything is working great. We'll smack him for 2. Draw a card. Smack him for 2. He blocked for 12. Hit him. Hit him. Turn. And our vulnerable is now gone, so we will not take more damage. Hit him. Hit him. He's still defending, so we can't do anything when he keeps defending. We can block this though. 5 and 3. This will block for 11. Because now we're vulnerable. Now he's going to hit for 10, but he's actually going to hit for 15. This number did not update, as it should have. We'll have to look into that. Defend 6 of it. And if we did it correctly, we should take 9 damage. 4, so that didn't work. Ooh, we are constantly getting vulnerables. Why? Alright, so that is the end of this tutorial. Thank you guys so much. We'll work on some more polish in the next video. We're going to fix a couple things. And yeah, so if you liked this video, make sure you hit the like button. If you really like it, hit the subscribe button. And I'm looking forward to finishing this tutorial. I probably have about 2 to 3 more videos left. And until next time, guys, take care. See ya.